Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar about teaching grammar in EAP courses. Thank you to today's presenters, Marlon Schoep, who is the Academic Manager at Stanley College in Perth, and Sharon Phillips, who's an EAP teacher and bridging course teacher at Curtin University English Language Centre in Perth. So thanks very much for coming to present. These guys presented this session at PD West, which is a PD festival in Perth at the beginning of the year, and they're back to present it as a webinar for us today.
Okay, so good afternoon to everyone listening out there, and thanks for listening in. Sophie's just introduced us. To give you a bit of background about how we developed this, last year we were both working at the same place, and we wanted to do a bit of research on teaching methodology. And we both have a background starting out in general English, and at the time we were both teaching EAP, so a bridging course, and we thought we'll have a look at methodology in terms of things that we found happening with our teaching, so sort of mismatches that we were finding between methodology and the materials and trying to look at grammar in our course. So yeah, we really hope that you guys will find this helpful as well. We're aiming to do the presentation part in about 20 minutes or so, and there should be lots of time for questions at the end, provided the technology works with us. So to set the scene a bit, we want you to just start by imagining something. So imagine that you're teaching a upper intermediate or CEFR B2 plus level EAP class, and you come to your lesson planning and you have this outcome on your syllabus. So that's recognize and use active and passive voice accurately. And these are the materials that you have to teach with. I'm hoping that you can see that clearly. Sorry if that's too zoomed out. I'm just going to go back to the first page of the materials. Okay, so if you're thinking about that outcome and you're looking at these materials, maybe you've noticed that it says the passive down here in this box. Maybe you have looked at the next page, looking for some practice perhaps. You've maybe seen this task here and seen some things about essay writing. So perhaps you might be thinking, this doesn't look like a grammar lesson. And it's true, it doesn't look like a grammar lesson from general English. If you see a grammar point, I know my experience has been that my sort of training automatically kicks in and I think, okay, right, PPP, where's the practice? And there doesn't seem to be much in these materials. So this can be quite an issue, I guess, if you are trying to teach with them. But what we found is perhaps the issue is not really with the materials, but with the methodology. So the issue is that there are some fundamental differences in terms of how grammar fits into higher level EAP lessons. So let's think about that some more. Oops. Oops. Sorry, while I just click through these again. So these are some features of how grammar fits into lessons at lower levels and higher levels. So they're all mixed up. So again, just have a think about how you would categorize these into which level. We'll just give you a minute. Okay. So what we found when we researched this in the literature was as follows. There's three main differences here. So firstly, in terms of the focus, the level of the focus at lower levels, whereas at lower levels, the focus is on grammar at the sentence level. At higher levels, it's how the grammar functions in wider discourse. So for example, if you're talking about the present perfect, rather than just sort of making sentences, questions and answers, it's maybe how is the present perfect used to make a general statement at the beginning of an essay introduction, or how are pronouns used to establish cohesion in a paragraph. So there's always some function in the wider discourse. In terms of the lesson planning, whereas at lower levels, it's grammar driven, so the whole lesson may center around a grammar point, and sort of just bringing that into production as your end point. At higher levels, it's discourse driven, so the grammar is just something that fits into a wider aim, like writing a cohesive paragraph. It's one of the tools that you'll need. And as a result of this affects the material. So that's the third difference. Whereas at lower levels, they're maybe still learning the basic form and function. There's lots of practice provided for that. At a higher level, that's assumed. And so there's not much practice with that because it's all about going beyond and using it for a certain function. So obviously with these differences, that implies a need for different methodology as well. So Marlon's going to continue on by talking about that.
All right, so I guess that we'll do, well, we want to talk about how we're going to navigate this. How do we navigate teaching these lessons where we have grammar in EAP class? And what we've done is what I guess every other ESL person has done before us, and that is to create an acronym. Yay! This acronym is, oh, hold on. Sorry, Sophie, I've lost the navigation again. Oh, it's coming up. I'll remove my mouse out the way. I'll let Sophie deal with it. I think Sophie's there. I hope she's there. What's there? See, I'm disinclined to press the next button in case it shoots forward 2 slides and I have to go back. I'll press it one more time.
Oh.
Ah, we're in luck. No, it did shoot forward a few slides. Let's go back again. And that's the one there. So this is the acronym that we've made. It's PREP, stands for position, reactivate, plus, and produce. And this kind of outlines a methodology that you can use for teaching grammar in higher levels. So let's move on. And first look at position. So we're going to kind of look at the text that we showed before to illustrate these ideas and how you can use them. As Sharon mentioned, when we want to put grammar into an EAP lesson, the lesson doesn't necessarily revolve around the grammar point. The lesson tends to revolve around the discourse, and in particular, the rhetorical function of the language. So to put that in more concrete terms, in EAP, for example, it might revolve around an essay, so a particular genre, and that grammar is to help you try and write that essay. So let's have a look at how it's presented in the book. Don't want to sign to Skype. I don't think that's my screen. Okay, click this again, take a risk. Okay, so now I've got the book, and so let's look at the outcomes that they had for the chapter. Analyzing an essay introduction, writing and evaluating a thesis statement, writing and evaluating an essay introduction. It doesn't say anything about the passive at all. So as you can see, this already differs very much from general English, where usually at the beginning of a chapter it says using the present perfect, for example. So let's go through the activities, just get an idea of where we're going to position the grammar. So we're trying to get a handle on introductions by looking at features. And then we're analyzing, evaluating thesis statements, figuring out how they work. And then we suddenly have this grammar, which kind of seems random, sort of out of the blue. And you notice that the grammar doesn't talk about the basic formal function. It seems to be talking about an added function. I'll just go back, which in this particular case is maintaining focus. And we move on. We have a practice activity for maintaining focus. And then we're writing a thesis statement. And the last one, of course, is putting that thesis statement in an essay. Now, taking that all into consideration, we should probably rewrite our outcome. So this will be the revised outcome. The learner can use the passive voice accurately and appropriately to maintain focus in an essay. And in fact, maybe this should be fronted the other way around. The learner can write an essay and in parts use the passive to maintain focus. So really the bigger picture, the purpose of the essay, purpose of the lesson is to write an essay. So there you have discourse. So let's move on now to the next part of our acronym here, which is Reactivate. Most students who do EAP at a B2 plus level, they should really know the basic form and function of the passive. So we're not really going to reteach that. What we want to do is identify how much they know. So part of this is about diagnosis, so diagnostic exercises, and the other part is about differentiation, catering to the different needs of the students in the class. So one way to do this is to actually do the diagnostic before the class. So traditionally we have this TTT model where we do a diagnostic in class, but hey, then how do you actually prepare for the class? Because you don't know who needs what before the class. So what we do is we do our diagnostic before the class. And I'll suggest giving them an activity where they have to use a passive, maybe with a supplementary grammar reference where they can read up on it. It's just for them to polish up on the basic form and function. What I usually do is I give them, say, an online exercise, and I ask them to give me their results on WhatsApp so I can see who's doing well, who's not doing well, and then I make sure that exercise links directly to a reference. So if they need to polish up, they can do that. Great. So even before we move into the classroom, I've got a pretty good idea. I've got this thing's jumped up down the bottom again. That might have been my mouse strain down there. Sorry, Sophie. All right, thank you. Oh no, we've gone back to the beginning. Sophie's got it under control. So if you just let me
Sorry.
know if the power doesn't come up again, that's cool. We can go ahead without it.
No, can you see it now?
Unfortunately, no.
You can't see it. Okay. Hmm.
Oh, there we
How's
go.
that? Yep. Okay.
All right. Nice outcome. Nice.
So you can probably
Yes.
take over the control again.
Okay. Am I doing something wrong?
No, no, no. I'm not sure what happened then.
All right, great. So we've talked about reactivation before the class, giving them review, and also giving them exercise they can do. This also allows us to identify where the differentiation needs to be applied. And then in class, what I actually usually do is group them by level. Okay. I'm not going to be reteaching the basic form and the basic function. I'm going to use CCQs very carefully to identify where those gaps are, so I can address them with individual students. When I give students practice exercises in the class, the way I address emergent needs is to monitor intensively. So this is monitoring, I think, in many ways is one of those, it's really understated how important it is to dealing with differentiation in the classroom. And because I'm entering having those students in different groups, I'll have my strong group. So if they do finish exercise early, they're going to need extension activities. So this is a way you address this reactivation part of grammar in an EAP lesson. Okay, so let's move on. And of course, now we have the plus. We've got the grammar, we've got the basic form and function, but of course they're learning something new in this unit. And here it's, what was it? Focusing on
using the passive
to maintain focus. Yeah, so you have to now present the plus. And you can do that in any way. You could do that with a PPP structure, for example, introducing that new function and presenting it and practicing it and producing it. Now that stage fits within, I guess, the overall big picture of the lesson, which is how to write the essay. So let's look at how they fit that in. We've got a very basic grammar explanation. There's some practice which specifically relates to that specific function that we just covered, the plus. And then we move to the overall production. In this lesson, of course, this production relates to writing a thesis statement and also to actually writing an essay, which is the final activity or the introduction part of an essay. What is important here is that this is fed forward into the students' own work. So they're able to apply the language for their own rhetorical purpose. And EAP courses, they're often writing essays. It could be for a critical response, could be for a research project or a discursive essay. And they're going to use the passive to maintain focus in their own work. So the last step, of course, is to apply this for their own, or for the production of their own work. Okay. All right. I'll just leave Sharon to take over now.
Okay. Oh, I have clicked twice. Go back. Just click back. Okay, sorry. So yeah, just to recap, we've looked at outcomes and the need to frame language within discourse rather than just language on its own. We've looked at the need to identify students' needs in terms of maybe gaps in their language and their readiness to move on to applying it. And how to reactivate language rather than just teaching it from the beginning, and also how we can see grammar then as just part of this focus on wider discourse, and that should be the goal with higher level EAP. So we hope that this has been thought-provoking for you guys. Or even if not, that you've got a lot of questions for us.
Okay, so would you like people to ask their questions now if they have any?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay, so if anyone has any comments or questions for Marlon and Sharon, can you please type them into the chat box? Okay, so we have a comment come through, very clear and useful. There's a question. Do you have any recommended grammar reference sources for information or practice?
I wonder if that is with reference to that reactivation stage. I suppose so, right?
Sorry, I mean, I'm guessing we mean grammar specific to EAP?
Yep.
Or
so they've said yes in terms of reactivation.
Oh, reactivation. I have to admit, usually I'll go online and there are so many resources there. Some are horrible and some are quite nice. I guess the British Council is a sort of stock standard place for that, and it has some very good explanations as well as videos that go along with their grammar explanations. So students seem to find those quite useful. Sharon, do you have any others?
I think just the sort of really classic things like, Raymond Murphy's Grammar in Use, or the Good Grammar Book, or the I think it's Oxford EAP Grammar. Yeah, it's quite good too.
I mean, Raymond Murphy's had this really great supplementary series. So you've got the blue, red, and I think it's green book. Then you have this little book that comes with it, which basically really focuses on how students choose between grammar. So about choices and function, because often they know the form and they know the meaning, but can actually use it. That's a different question. So those supplementary books I find really useful for drilling down into that. Yeah. And of course, many of the textbooks come with their own grammar references as well. And a lot of those now are online, so students can actually log in. So that's a really great resource that also allows students to reactivate their language.
Okay, and somebody has a question which is related to this reactivation topic. How can you reactivate grammar knowledge and fill in gaps in groups with very mixed abilities and mixed backgrounds?
I think a lot of that comes, for me, a lot of it's about identifying what those groups are. That's my first step. So really it's in that diagnostic testing. Whether that's done online or you actually even do it in class the day before. It allows you to get that information on what those groups are and then prepare for the following lesson. And you may very well find you have a group that somehow has got through to B2 level without the basic form and function, and that you actually will need to teach that to them. So it's a bit more prep, but you can almost run those concurrent lessons in the class. I'm always a little disinclined to do the weak-strong pairing in this situation. I often find it's quite unfulfilling for students who are quite strong. Granted, they may get something from that process of reviewing it with someone who doesn't know how to do it, but often I kind of feel like I'm selling it short for them, that these guys really should be extending, and whole demand high philosophy should be kind of applied there.
Yeah, I think spanning 2 days really helps in terms of the potential for maybe getting students to work independently, for example, using an online resource, or even a paper one where they can, you know, they've got access to the answers, so they can catch up at their own pace, and it's not gonna delay others. And I think that's why I suggest those really basic, very clear ones like Murphy or something. It's pretty student friendly, I think. And then the other thing is, as you said, if you're going to do it in class, if you know in advance of the class that, you know, you've got a mix, then you can actually, prepare your sort of almost 2 lessons. But that's very hard to do on the spot. So that's why you're having the 2 days, and that diagnostic helps, I think.
Great. And do you have any tips for diagnostics that you use?
Tips.
Or can you just unpack the term diagnostic for people in terms of
Sometimes
what you
I
do?
get the students,
Sorry?
I get them to write. I would get them to produce something. So writing something, even sentences.
Yeah.
Because that will show, it will show a lot. I mean, you could also do it at the level of a gap fill exercise, but that's sort of only going to catch out the weakest ones, and then you might want to see what is there at the next level that, you know, they've got the sort of procedural knowledge, but they can't actually produce a sentence.
Yeah, I agree totally. It's all about, especially the B2 plus level, it's about seeing whether they can produce the language, and sometimes kind of open form writing is the best way for that. But you need to make sure it's a context which specifically gets them to use that language point, because otherwise, if it's too broad, you're not going to get a sample of the language that you want to use, which might not necessarily mean they can't use it, just means they forgot to use it or didn't use it.
But do you ever, for example, like ask your students just send 3 passive sentences, like on WhatsApp, send it to the class group, something like that?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. I would do things like that, and then I've got it with me, you know, after class. I've got time to look at it and see.
And you can scaffold that. You can sort of put an image on WhatsApp or something like that, or a small video, and might ask them to make some sort of commentary. And in their commentary, use at least 3 passive sentences or something like that. So it could be within a larger discourse to see how they link it to the rhetorical purpose.
Yeah. Okay, great. I think that answers that question really well. Thank you. There's someone here who has a comment about this lesson, because they say that they've taught this lesson several times, and in their view, there are other issues that make the materials difficult to use. They've listed the issues, so I'll just let everybody know what the comment is. Firstly, the topic of tourists is not relating to the students' needs. Secondly, the scaffolding doesn't lead well from introductions for an essay to a full essay. And thirdly, the cultural reference to Bob Dylan.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think with every lesson or every textbook, you sit down and you think, wow, is this going to work? How's it going to work with my students? And you kind of often sit back and you adjust it to suit your needs. What would you say?
Yeah. There's no perfect textbook, and I think we've certainly heard our fair share of comments about that textbook, and I guess we're not necessarily promoting this particular textbook. I guess it's more about how to approach grammar with a material like this.
And I think it's a very common material that a lot of colleges are using. All right, somebody has asked if, sorry, my feed's moved. Should we focus more on error correction of students' writing or on grammar lessons on specific grammar points? So I guess if they're asking about sort of globally or more specifically teaching grammar.
Josh, can I?
Yeah, you go.
I think both have their place. I really do. I feel like you focus on different parts, different things in different parts of the lesson. So if I'm at the grammar stage of the lesson, I'm, depending on which stage I am within that lesson, whether it's my practice or my freer production, I'll be using different techniques. I might be looking at error correction at a very basic level if it's form and function, but also if they're using it, for example, in a paragraph or an introduction, I'll also be looking at error correction. But that error correction is always purposeful, I guess. And sometimes you do decide to let errors go because you're looking at a larger purpose. That's not what you're focusing on for the day. And other times, yeah, you're like, okay, this is a definite error. You've got to enter it in your log. Before you write next time, read your log, make sure you don't make it again, kind of thing. Anything to add?
Yeah, well, yeah, I agree with you that they're both really important. I think there's a lot of benefit from error correction, but it can be very personal. And, if you have 18 students, there's just a limited amount of attention you can give each student. And also, in terms of what are the other students doing at that time. And perhaps even the student's sort of satisfaction, like that lends itself to the process writing kind of approach. And I think I've found before that students are a bit frustrated by that because they're like, well, can you give me some input? Can you give me something new to put into my writing before I just do it. But on the other hand, because it's personal, it's very powerful. So yeah, I think they both have an important place.
This particular lesson we use is huge. It's writing thesis statements, and they might not even get the idea of how to write thesis statements before they can apply the grammar, i.e. using in that manner. So I would kind of tread quite carefully and sort of like, I might decide, okay, for this exercise, I'm just going to focus on then getting the structure of a thesis statement, what the contents would be. And then as I move it along, I might decide, okay, now we're going to drill down into the actual language accuracy or actually how they're using the function of this passive for the purpose that we want. I don't know if we answered the question. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I feel like you did. Yeah. Now, I think you've said that both are important, so you've just given us information on both sides of the argument, so I think you have answered it. That's the end of the questions for now. Sharon and Marlon, do you have any other comments or anything else you'd like to say before we finish up?
I want to thank my mom. Really, I don't know. I don't know anything professional to say, sorry. Let me think.
All right. There are a couple of handouts. Yeah. Sorry?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the last part of this is actually, we tend to sort of come into class and we have a lot of time pressures and we sort of race through our lessons and we apply the methodologies we taught. And a lot of this process is about sort of sitting down, I guess, with your colleagues, and many people already do this, and sort of taking the time to say, look, how should we really approach this? How does this fit in terms of methodology, and can we do it better? The book is presenting a certain way. We think it works like this. Does it really work like this? No. How are we going to make it work? I think that's pretty much what a lot of people do. But in terms of improving our practice and improving what we give to learners, I feel like that's the core takeaway for us in our process for exploring this. I have nothing else to add unless you do.
Yeah, I hope that's been interesting for others as well. I think for me, certainly when we looked at this, it was a crystallizing of something that I sort of inherently noticed after quite a while of teaching EAP, but without it being ever explicitly told to me. And I wonder if there are others who just go from general English to EAP within a centre with no sort of no explicit instruction about how you might need to vary things. So yeah, thanks, and I hope it's been helpful.
Yeah, no, it definitely has. And I think especially for teachers making that transition, as you say, from teaching more general English classes to EAP, I think it's invaluable to have this kind of session where we get inside your heads and hear about when you go to teach a grammar or teach grammar point in an EAP lesson. So thank you very much to our presenters, and thank you to everybody for coming.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are a couple of handouts that we'll be emailing to people tomorrow, as well as the link to today's recording. All right, thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thanks.
There we go.